year, but they're going to be called in this year now, 2 of them. I mean, is everybody familiar with the tranche 1 that was released, the category of tranche 1 buildings that was released by the regulator? Yeah, I think
do you want to just explain that, Mandy, just for a
second? Yeah, so basically what it is, the building safety regulator, so all the existing buildings, the 12,000 or so existing buildings, they'll be assessing them in 5 tranches. And what happens is in tranche 1, I'll bring up the category actually on the screen if you bear with me a minute, but they've done it from highest risk kind of buildings to the lower ones. So all the taller buildings, or those buildings with ACM cladding or large paneling systems, they will kind of all fall in tranche 1, and this is the first one they'll be assessing. And like I say, so they plan to do it over 5 years for all existing 12,000 buildings. And when new buildings are registered, they'll be assessing those in silos. Obviously, they haven't come up with the timelines or deadlines yet for how they're going to be dealing with new buildings, but they'll be releasing that soon, maybe. But I'll give the definition of tranche 1. Bear with me. Just it's where have I put it? Sorry, I wasn't aware I was going to be pulling this up. So
no, sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
It's just you.
Yeah, I mentioned it.
you volunteered.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe we pull back into any other business. David, I'll stop interfering and let you.
I'll let you guys carry on, and then I'll try and quickly find that. It's all over the internet as well, but I'll just quickly try and get that. Nice.
Okay, Mandy, you might not be able to share actually. I think I need to give you permission to do that. Okay. That is proving to be beyond my technical capabilities right now, but fine. I will follow that through.
That's fine. Yeah. That's
okay. So good morning, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Dave Pote, and I'm technical manager at Notting Hill Genesis. And it's fallen to me over the last couple of years to chair these conversations. I've obviously upset somebody at some point, but it's all been quite good fun. I think there's too many in the room, obviously, to go through introductions. However, there are a couple of kind of key players, I think. The first one being George. So George, I don't know if you want to quickly introduce yourself to those that may not know you.
Yeah, sure. I chair BIM4Housing, and also the Golden Thread Initiative Asset and Survey Information Group. So what we're doing at the moment is pulling together information and feeding that back to the department. And when I was at the Building Safety Regulator conference last week, the department, the Deluxe, were very interested in what we're doing. So they've asked us to provide a report back to them, which we're actually going to do after we have the conference, after we have the workshops at Digital Construction Week next week. So that's dealing with the 4 barriers to the golden thread that we've been working on for the last year. We've also started something called BIM in Asset Management, which is to take the learning that we've had for residential and apply it to all types of buildings. And we held the first of those events last Monday, and that was extremely well attended. And I think we've got a very good engagement there. So the more we can promote, because a lot of these stuffs that we're doing here, in particular things like fire, are relevant to all buildings. Yeah. And then my day job is Active Plan. So we're a software company providing asset information management systems. That's it.
Thank you, George. For those of you that are used to chairing meetings with George, and if you ask him to introduce himself and you assume it's going to take 10 seconds, then kind of prepare yourselves. Really useful, George. Thank you. Is Richard Freer on the call? Richard, do you want to introduce yourself if you're around?
No, I think he might be at the vets.
Yeah, he's not here.
He's not. He's at the vets.
Yeah.
I won't inquire as to. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Okay, so for those of you that have been with us before for the conversations that we have, then welcome back. For those of you that are new, similarly welcome, and I hope you find this morning's conversation of interest and of use. As with all of these kind of sessions, we haven't got anything to talk to you about particularly. Our role here is to try and facilitate a conversation, so that conversation will only be as good as people choose to participate. So I would urge you to participate if you can, and we can start a conversation. Over the last a number of years, we've been reviewing a number of topics as George suggested, and one of the topics that has come up in the past, but we haven't really explored it in a huge amount of detail, is the emergence of the principal designer role. And we're very keen to have a conversation about everyone's perspectives on that, because that perspective will be different depending on how you're looking at it, whether you're a client, whether you're a contractor, whether you're a consultant, etc., etc. So we circulated a series of questions that were just an attempt to start some dialogue. So my plan this morning is to go through those questions. If anyone has other questions that they want to add to the list, then that's absolutely fine. And I know that George has got a couple of kind of AOB items that he wants to get into at the end as well. So that's kind of how the morning will play out. So hopefully that's okay for everyone. If people do have stuff to contribute, two ways to do that. Obviously, put your hand up and I'll bring you into the conversation, or just drop stuff into the chat, and hopefully between us we'll pick that up. Okay, so with no further ado, start with the first topic of conversation and the first question, which was about at what point do we think it's relevant to start appointing principal designers into the process? You'll have seen from the notes that were circulated, what one of our participants, who will remain nameless but be gentle because they are on the call. One of our participants has offered up a response that seems to suggest employing principal designers earlier in the process is advantageous for all of the reasons that they have described. I'm going to play devil's advocate and offer up a slightly different perspective, which is we probably don't need to employ principal designers until the Gateway 2 design process has started, because it's the kind of Gateway 2 process that sets the line in the sand in terms of a building regulation compliant design. I'm not suggesting that is the answer. I'm just suggesting it's an alternative answer. And as I say, it'll depend on your perspectives. So two topics of conversation. One, what are people's experiences in terms of appointing and when, and do people have a view on what constitutes being compliant in terms of regulatory requirement versus what probably is a good idea and best practice? Victoria, welcome. You're the first one to put your hands up. So
Hi.
what are your thoughts?
Sorry, I've got a bit of a cold, so sometimes I might come out my voice. I was just thinking, under the regulations, though, I think it's not just applying now to HRBs, is it? It's applying to domestic properties as well.
Yeah.
So I guess there's two sort of ways to look at this then, isn't there, really? I think if we're doing major high-risk works, then the sooner the better to employ the PD, I would guess. If you're doing the smaller works or extensions or one-off works to houses, to homes, then to me, then I would look to be a bit later in the project, because you've not got that high-risk design element. That's the sort of way that I would look at it, and that seems to be the natural flow for me. Obviously, everybody's got different opinions. It'd be interesting to hear what the people think on that. But
Lovely,
considering
thanks.
considering if it's on high risk buildings as well, and I know you're saying look at Gateway 2, but the design element is so important, isn't it? And I think the PD's feed into that could be quite important as well.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. Anyone offer further comment? What are people's, so I suspect we're on different stages in our journeys in terms of appointing principal designers. You know, so for me, we've not within our organization got to a point. Obviously we're thinking about it and we're preparing the documentation, but we haven't actually physically appointed anyone into that role as of yet. What has others got other experiences? Has anyone appointed principal designer yet?
I mean, we haven't appointed, obviously we're consultants, we haven't appointed any principal designers, but I mean, I would just like to add to that the principal designer role now just applies, obviously, as Victoria mentioned, it applies to HRBs, and the duty holder regime basically applies to all buildings now, not just HRBs. So
Yeah.
even if you're doing other projects, you have to kind of do that. And I think the only kind of main considerations have come up. I mean, there's government guidance on the website which really nicely splits up the actual like kind of additional duties you have to do if it's HRB as a duty holder, and the kind of duties that you're expected to complete on all projects basically. I mean, the only thing I would kind of maybe want to add to this is that obviously I think that one of the kind of most important things to bear in mind as well is when you're appointing for a HRB, you've got there's some considerations you've got to take when you're appointing a principal designer, such as the like if any serious sanctions have occurred from the 5 years of appointment. So I mean, we're working with a client now actually to look at their policies and processes, and so generally throughout all their gateway processes basically, so all their processes for kind of building information, general kind of processes, we're reviewing them to make them align with the building safety regulations, building safety regulations. So yeah, like for example, on their appointments, just kind of any serious sanctions have occurred, and obviously keeping a written record of the steps that people are taking to satisfy themselves that the person is kind of competent and the suitable person. Yeah.
No, spot on, completely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Rosie, you've put your hand up.
Morning all.
Sorry,
Apologies,
Rosie, could you just introduce where you're from, please? Sorry.
Yeah, so I used to work in the building safety team at Peabody until quite recently, and now I've gone back private sector side, so working actually in the principal designer role among other projects as an architect with surveyors. So
fantastic, thank you.
Generally, from the research I've been doing and the projects that we're starting to get appointed on as PDs, I think obviously legally you're required to be appointed prior to the start of construction on site, but looking at it purely from a sort of HRB and larger development experience, which is what I've pretty much been laser focused on, the earlier the better is sort of my professional opinion, in that the principal designer role is one to basically facilitate everyone else to make sure everyone's got their competency properly evidenced, has evidenced compliance in their various designs. So even as early as pre-planning, you know, the kind of gateway one fire strategy, that sort of information is stuff that holistically it would be really good for the PD to keep track of and just log the design intent of that. So yeah, basically as early as possible would be my kind of professional preference, but at the same time, we have started to get requests from clients that are panicking. They've started on site and suddenly realized they need to appoint a PD. So we're quite wary at taking on roles that late, but somewhere between those two extremes is probably fine.
Yeah, thanks, Rosie, and that seems to be pretty consistent with the response that we documented in the agenda, that there are advantages to being earlier. So it's interesting. Victoria's point, I think, is that there's a little bit horses for courses, you know. So depending on the nature of the project and the risks associated with those projects, that might be have a bearing on the decision around appointing early. And it feels like there's a kind of regulatory position. There's a kind of minimum you know, making sure you meet the regulatory requirements position, but there's also actually there's a best practice position, you know, that says there are advantages. Scott, welcome. Nice to meet you. Do you want to just introduce yourself quickly, mate? And because I know
Hi,
who
David.
you are, but other people might not.
No problem. Thanks, David. Morning, everybody. I'm Scott Sanderson from PRP. I confess I fed into the responses that are in the agenda, the blue text you may have seen. So I've got a couple of comments, I think, just to add to the conversation. I think what's been really interesting in our dialogue with clients is I think almost sort of like a maturing conversation around design risk management. So obviously the sort of major focus around gateways is compliance and satisfying requirements. And obviously there's that sort of massive focus on the Gateway 2 application, particularly as a design consultant. However, I think clients are also really, really interested in project deliverability, so that we are better in control of deliverable planning consents. So, if you look at the sort of baseline input to a FAR statement, it can be pretty high level if you just follow baseline minimums for those documents. But actually, to achieve a deliverable to consent, you want a much wider view of compliance, I think, and particularly with more and more projects being procured through two-stage process. As clients take projects out to the market and engage with their tier one, with their main contractor, that a client can demonstrate they've got a strong grip on compliance, I think helps de-risk that procurement engagement process, and more often than not, that's happening well in advance of a Gateway 2 application. So I think there's more to it than just de-risking Gateway 2. There's that wider view on deliverability demonstrated or captured in a planning consent, and then procurability, if that's a word, in terms of early supply chain engagement. So I think the commitment to the process adds value in a number of different ways to projects.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. I mean, just a response to that. Certainly one of the risks that we're very mindful of at planning stage is, we don't want to be committing to a planning submission that then subsequently proves to be inadequate from a building regulations perspective. Particularly around space usage. Sprinkler tanks is a phenomenal conversation that we have on a regular basis. So I think you're right. Getting those assurances earlier in the process de-risks the project for not only the client, but, as you say, for the procurement process that follows. So I kind of get that. And anyone got any other observations or comments they'd like to make on this particular aspect?
Just picking up on what Scott was saying there, that interests me from a point of view of engaging contractors, because contractors now, certainly from the feedback I'm getting, are being quite selective about which projects they get engaged with.
Yeah.
And if the project has got some clear if they can see that the design and the client has thought about this properly, then that's going to de-risk it for them, isn't it? No, absolutely. And again, maybe playing devil's advocate, whether you need to formally appoint a principal designer in order to do that, or whether you just need to demonstrate that everything's well planned and well coordinated. But the two kind of go hand in hand, right? You can formally evidence that process has been well managed.
Yeah, I mean, David, just to add that quickly, we have a number of clients who are really committed to stage reporting, and it's part of their own internal governance and sort of reporting procedures. And I guess historically, like a good stage 2 or REBA stage 2 or REBA stage 3 report would have captured things like bins and bikes and fire strategy. So that sort of strategy-led approach would have been there. I think it can still be there. You're just articulating it in a different way. The rather than just making a statement, for instance, about bins, we're saying the reason we have this number of bins is that we're satisfying a particular requirement. You know, so it's now positioning the strategies in the context of, well, in this new context of demonstrating compliance with the requirements of the building regulations.
Yeah, no, thank you. No, that's useful. Okay, I'm gonna move on to the next question, if that's okay. If no one's got any final comments, we may circle back to it.
Sorry, can I just
sorry,
one last point. I was biting my tongue a little bit, but I think I should make it because this is like a kind of, it's BIM as well. So, I mean, I don't know what in terms of the kind of principal designers, they have the kind of plan, manager, monitor responsibility.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure, I mean, how many kind of people got in the chat today, which kind of principal designers effectively. But I mean, I spoke to in the BSR conference. I asked a question last week that the kind of BIM concepts for managing deliverables, like your MIDEPs and TIDEPs and that kind of stuff, is so I think that's the kind of best way to kind of plan, manage, and monitor, so you can kind of look at your deliverables and kind of manage against that, because you need some kind of benchmark, a goalpost to kind of to run against or measure up against. But I mean, when I asked the BSR, how will you actively be checking that people are planning, monitoring, managing, and monitoring their work? It seemed like they said that they wouldn't be. In that sense, it's only if something goes wrong. But I mean, I don't know what the general kind of impression in the room is about the kind of concepts of because obviously this is a BIM4Housing group, so like the BIM concepts of using kind of like master information delivery plans and the task information delivery plans. I don't know how many principal designers are actually using that approach to plan, manage, and monitor their work.
Okay, do we have anyone that can offer up a response to that?
I'd very much like to support what Mandeep's saying there, and say that we need a straightforward process, I think, of capturing the evidence of the fact that that work has been done properly.
Yeah.
And my impression is that, you know, from talking to Scott last year on this, one of the challenges that any principal designer's got is really understanding not that PLP, for example, have done the work properly, but what has the M&E people done, what have the structural people done, etc.
Yeah.
And therefore the documented evidence of that is critical. And therefore I absolutely agree that we need to have tangible, auditable ways of tracking that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, no, useful. Any other thoughts? Thank you, George.
Because just to add on that as well, sorry, obviously the BS 8644 Part 1 now just talks about staged kind of deliverables and monitoring against I think they call it interval exchange points. So I mean, obviously I know that's particularly for the fire and kind of structural. It's for fire and structural information of buildings only. Yeah. But I mean, I was just curious because like on prior to kind of moving to the consultancy side, we were on I was at HS2 with Care, and they did there was a very kind of a very kind of shall I say comprehensive system to on that we had set up to manage our kind of deliverables, basically, just to make sure we're getting all the deliverables in time. If we're not getting deliverables, because obviously that's effectively going to affect program and all of that. So I think it's all well kind of saying you receive the information at the end and checking it, but we need some kind of mechanisms in place to do the kind of progressive checking. Otherwise, effectively out of the plan, manage, monitor, we're not actually doing the monitoring. We've done the planning maybe, and then we've got the handover, but where's the monitoring? And I think that's the big thing that we're all missing right now.
Okay, no, thank you. I mean, I think the summary of the conversation that we've just had for me is that the general consensus around the group seems to be that the advantages of employing principal designers earlier. I'll come back to you, Rosie. The advantages of employing principal designers early are reasonably clear. Part of that advantage, I think, plays to what Mandeep is saying, which is, and what George is saying, is that what the principal designer needs to bring to the table is a structured approach, not only how they're planning their work, but they're planning or getting involved in the planning of other people's works, and how that is collated, how that is evidenced. So even though the building safety regulator may not require that level of scrutiny, it's something that client organizations, developers can have in their back pockets, you know, if things were to happen in the future, to evidence the robustness of the process that's been gone through. That's kind of my take on what we're saying here. Rosie, forgive me, you put your hand up.
Yeah, it was just to kind of sort of explain what we're thinking about in terms of how to fulfill the monitoring part of the PD role. So
Okay.
we're setting up sort of more robust internal systems. We've not fully agreed it, but what we're aiming for is when you submit the building regulations compliance statement at Gateway 2, that's like a sort of standalone design intent of how you're going to meet the building regs. But if you have a tracker, and we're a really small company, so we keep things pretty simple. We don't, you could do it in a really clever way if you're a big company with Revit, and you could link drawings with schedule of how you're complying to each part of the building regs. But we're just using Excel for now, and we're starting it as early as possible. So even, you know, pre-planning, you can list out the design intent for each of the regs, the kind of guidance that you've received, any drawings that evidence how you're going to comply with that. And then you just update that either at key stages or at monthly site progress meetings. You kind of keep an eye on it, and you just make sure that then any changes from the original intent are inspected, coordinated with the team. And so that's how we're doing it, which is pretty low tech. But if you've got much bigger projects, you're much more clever about it, you could link your drawings, which evidence the design intent, actually with a schedule, and it would be quite a neat way to do it, I think. It would reduce duplication.
Thanks, Rosie. That's really helpful. The conversation around the tech might be something that we come to later, because I know George has got some AOB items that he wants to talk about, some of the tech stuff. So we may come around to that again. Okay, thank you, everyone. Conscious of time, just want to kind of move things along. The next question we had was around who are actually fulfilling who are putting themselves forward to carry out principal designer roles. You know, stereotypically, you kind of think that it's always going to be architects, but I suspect it isn't exclusively. So, you know, I'm sure employers' agents, you know, are going to be putting themselves into this situation. What are people's experiences of who are the organisations that are putting themselves forward? Do we think, you know, if there aren't enough people to go around, are we going to have capacity issues that we're going to come up against? What are people's thoughts about who is providing these services? Becky, welcome.
Hi, hello.
Hi.
I'm Becky. Sorry, there might be a little bit of background noise because I'm in the office. Yeah, I work for Peabody in the design and technical department. So we have some projects within the REBA 1, REBA 2 stages, and so we'll be going out to tender for a PD role, and we're aiming that towards the lead designers. So yeah, typically the architects. In some of our other projects, not necessarily within my directorate development, more of the asset side, we're seeing exactly what, as you said, employers agents type organizations take on that role, just because I think it's in the absence of an architect on those projects.
Yes.
But then we're also looking at our main contractors to take on principal designer role when it's in construction, and not that we've set anything in stone, but possibly even before the construction starts, if we're talking in the lead up to the Gateway 2 application, maybe the contractor's best placed at that point to take on the role.
Becky, thank you. No, that's helpful. Any other perspectives?
Can I just say, sorry, it's Paul White from Gratian Borough Council.
Hello, Paul White. How are you?
Hi. No, I'm not the damper expert, Paul White. I'm a run-of-the-mill client, but yeah, just adding on to that comment, and I'm just throwing, it is just throwing it out there. I guess we're going to have to update our collateral warranties if we've got architects taking on the principal designer role and think about that extra responsibility. As a client, there's something collateral warranties are always buzzing around that we have to doing and throw through design build contracts. So yeah, I'm just putting that out there as well. I don't know. I doubt if anybody's come to that point yet. But yeah, we've just done the same in terms of we're using the contractor's architect to be the building regs principal designer, but I'm just sort of at that point of trying to check competency and how we evidence that as suggested earlier. So yeah, early days.
No, thank you, Paul. Sam, you had your hand up.
Hi there, everyone. So I'm Sam from Stonewater Housing Association, and we've got a few big developments on the go at the moment. We've appointed Building Regulation PD, who is on our employer's agent framework, but we're also looking to appoint an architect. What we're finding, it's very difficult to get anybody who can demonstrate competencies. So skills, knowledge, experience, behaviours, especially along the lines of 8671. We've created SCEB assessments, etc., but it's very much very vague policies or statements and blank templates. So it's about the ongoing monitoring of them to be able to prove that they can do that moving forward. But another issue we're getting is professional indemnity insurance.
Yeah.
Organisations are unable to get professional indemnity insurance to cover the role.
Yeah.
So yeah, from our perspective, it's that, and we going back to the original questions, we tend to try and appoint them as early as we can because, as you all know, us as client will take on that responsibility as the PD. We just don't have the competencies in house or the insurance to cover that role. So
yeah, all right. Thank you, Sam. That's helpful. Again, just to maybe a slightly different perspective on the question. I can't talk for all of the organisations, but construction programs are quieter than normal. So in terms of the capacity requirements for these new roles, we're at a point where there probably is the capacity, but once programs start to ramp up again, it'll be interesting how the capacity is met for organisations that are willing to put themselves into these roles. Just a perspective. Victoria, got your hand up again.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, we are tending to use procurement bodies again quite a lot now, and again that's around making sure that the competencies are there. So people have already been taken onto the framework. We know they've got the competencies, and we know they've got the accreditations, and of course the insurances as well. So we're tending to where we want to come away from procurement bodies, we're tending to sort of go back to them quite a bit now because of you're needing to get on site quick, and you want to make sure everything's in place, and you're definitely playing ball with competencies. So we've got a reliance back on those, and we do tend to use employers agents, I think, for the PDs.
Yeah.
And that might be that they're sort of tied up in one sort of lot on some of the procurement groups as well. So that might be where people are going because of that reason.
Thank you, Victoria. Okay. Any other thoughts from anyone? More than welcome. Oh, Scott.
I
Can't
just
keep a good man down.
I just wanted to pick up on Becky's comment, actually, just around I think quite positive is that just a number of different scenarios emerging, whether it's kind of consultant taking the role or indeed a tier one main contractor, especially under D&B, taking the role. So I think it needs to be flexible to suit a number of different procurement strategies and kind of attitudes, preferences, capabilities of client organizations. So there's a number of different viable models from my perspective, and it's really just, I think, the client having a strategic view early, how they see it playing out, and kind of planning it out through the project is really important. And we and others can fit in really as clients need.
Yeah, no, that's really useful. Thanks, thanks, Scott. Okay, Corey.
Hi everyone. Just one thing I wanted to just jump in with around using sort of the principal contractor, particularly when it's on like a design and build contract. I think it's probably something to be aware of, just to make sure that the contractor doesn't have kind of like a biased view towards their sort of principal designer checks and making sure that everything meets building regs. And I suppose that will depend on, from a client point of view, kind of who's running the project, so and what their experiences are. I mean, I work for Gen 2, which is quite a large housing association up in the northeast, and our schemes are kind of run by building surveyors. So we have quite a good grip on what should meet building regs and things like that. But if you were a client that was running a project that maybe that isn't your expertise and you're reliant on that principal contractor, I guess it's just about making sure that they are very open and honest, and then there's that trust there for them to highlight any issues.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. You're not suggesting for a second that design and build contractors would blur the waters, surely?
Of course not.
Becky.
Yeah, just responding to Corey's point there. Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think maybe that, like, sort of when you're checking the competency of them, and like if you are intending to appoint the same organisation as both roles, then there should definitely be a piece on that within the information that they give you to assess competence. They should definitely be addressing that, about how they're going to avoid that. So is it two separate teams within the business that operate both roles or whatnot? I think that should definitely be picked up.
Yeah, no, really good points. And we'll come on to this a little bit, but it's interesting, the change in liabilities. You know, so from a legal perspective, you know, yes, there is a potential conflict of interest, I guess, you know, between being principal designer and principal contractor. But ultimately, at the end, they're signing a piece of paper that says, you know, this is compliant, and that's pretty that's pretty conclusive. So it'll be interesting how design and build contractors, particularly, you know, respond to that challenge. So just nice little segue into the next question, really, which is, you know, what one of the requirements of this role is really about ensuring compliance. You know, so at the end of it, there needs to be a signature on a piece of paper that says, you know, we to the best of our knowledge, this building is compliant. Probably more for people that are fulfilling the roles or planning to fulfill the role. What impact is that having on working procedures? You know, so that need to be able to ensure compliance and sign to that effect. How is that changing working practice? How is it changing kind of internal controls processes and those sorts of things? And again, I don't know if there's anyone in the room that's got a view on that. And no is okay. All right. Okay. I certainly don't have it. Oh, Scott. Thank the Lord.
No, happy to make a comment. I think my short answer to that is there's a massive shift. I think we're seeing a really significant shift in projects, number of levels. I think, you know, we were, you know, Mandeep flagged earlier, you know, just sort of looking at responsibility and how that's documented with regard to compliance. You know, there's a whole shifting conversation around DRMs, around appointments. I think we're seeing heavier and heavier use of trackers to track and monitor compliance. I think my major concern about the growing use of trackers, and I have to say I support the methodology, is that they challenge sort of analog systems, you know, including Excel. So we need a sort of database and, you know, much more intelligent responses to the volume of information that we're managing, particularly in large projects. And the other big shift I think we are seeing is increasing focus on design programming, because I think design is on the critical path in a way that it hasn't been previously.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, last year, our major tier 1 clients, if they had a glitch on design program, they'd just start piling, and they could go, and they could probably have 3 or 4 months of work whilst the design team are catching up. That can't happen now because we can't start without Gateway 2 approval. So there's a massive shift in focus on design programming. So yeah, big shift.
And just thinking about that programming, the need to ensure the compliance at the back end presumably requires of the process a bit more due diligence, a bit more scrutiny, a bit more governance.
Yep.
What if any is the kind of likely impact on project program timelines? So from a client perspective, can we expect design programs? I mean, they're lengthening it anyway for the reasons that you've described, but it is the process because it's more arduous. It could take more time.
Yeah, I think there's a kind of overlay on any existing program. There's a kind of administrative overlay. So if the start point should be that everybody was achieving compliance already, all of our clients are already procuring compliant designs, the step change is the demonstrable compliance and the paper trail that sits with that and how you capture it. So there's kind of an overlay that, if it's resourced properly, shouldn't necessarily elongate programs greatly. The biggest program impact, in my experience to date, is the decision making on the level of design completion to be achieved at Gateway 2.
Yeah.
And what's your attitude to prescriptive versus performance-based design in the context of any one project, and the extent to which it's considered necessary to procure subcontract design ahead of Gateway 2, and that can be zero impact if you take a hard line approach to changing your procurement strategy, or it can be massive, months and months and months of impact if you say we want all of that up front.
Yeah. Okay, no, thank you. I guess the anecdotal thinking right now is, yes, your design program may be extended, but in theory your construction program should reduce because there's greater certainty, etc., etc. But okay, no, that's useful. Anyone else got any thoughts before we move along? Okay. So I might be heavily relying on Scott again to respond to this next question, because it's an issue that he raised, frankly, but I don't want to throw him under the bus. Design liabilities. So principal designers, so architects, employers, agents, not only are taking responsibility for their own work, they're having to plan or make sure that other designers' work is well planned, is compliant, etc., etc. So that kind of raises the bar a little bit in terms of the liabilities that they potentially have to carry. So forgive me, Scott, for dragging you in, but I know this is something that you've talked about. What's been your response, or what is your thinking about how you will respond to having to take on responsibility for other members of the design team?
This is such an important discussion, and it's really important to be precise in this discussion. I think what the PDBR can't do, and has actually got to be incredibly careful to avoid, is to take on design responsibility for design where they don't have the relevant expertise. And indeed, a client's not procuring their services to deliver that design. So plan, manage, monitor, coordinate doesn't mean being responsible for something that's somebody else's responsibility. However, you have a responsibility to plan, manage, monitor, and coordinate. And I think in reality, it's quite difficult. Like, we often have conversations with clients around design development. What does that mean? Whether it's around change control or programming or options. I think in reality, you can you can kind of set out a broad framework, and contracts are going to have to do that, but then you're going to have to manage your position relative to the particular circumstance that you're, the matter in hand.
Yeah.
But certainly in terms of where we are heading in terms of preparation of service particulars and contracts is we need to be really robust for lots of obvious reasons, that we don't pick up responsibility for other designers' work.
Yeah. And I guess as client organizations, as you say, we need to be very precise in our language of describing the services and what the expectations are. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else who's either in a PD role or considering moving into a PD role got any views on this? Got any clients who've got any views on this? Yeah, it is a difficult one, isn't it? It is a difficult topic, and very much, I guess, a work in progress. In terms of how this is gonna play itself out. Okay, thank you, Scott, and apologies for putting you on the spot there, but thank you.
I'd just say something else, David, just about we've talked a little bit about kind of trackers and being well organized. I think as a PDBR, if you're kind of concerned with the challenge that the project team design demonstrates that the requirements are met, that requirements framework is articulated at a level of detail through the building regulations, and whether that's, you'd go back to the actual requirements, or you look at the guidance and the approved documents. So the PDBR, I think, is concerned with coverage and responses, not necessarily being expert in every specific response, but that there is a response to the requirement. So there's an element of coverage and management without being responsible. So you can see that something's not present. And that in itself is an issue. And then if you have competent designers and a competent design team and competent contractors and subcontractors, you're entitled to rely on their competence and their statements of compliance as they populate the different bits of information that make up the project pack.
Yeah. Okay, no, that's interesting. Thank you, Corey.
Yeah, just to kind of touch on what Scott's saying there. One of the projects that we're working on, we have a PD appointed who some elements of the work that we're doing are quite technical M&E elements. So they've appointed a separate M&E consultant to almost take a second review on the M&E designs, if you like, so that it's still being checked under the PD, who's appointed a separate consultant. So that might be something that people would look at, so that the principal designer isn't just saying, well, we're happy that there's a response from the M&E designer. They're actually getting an independent consultant to check that off as well for their sort of, I guess, as a sanity check sort of thing.
Yeah, no, thanks, Corey. And Scott, I mean, is that on PRP's radar as a potential approach?
It's really, really interesting point. I think the short answer is no. Actually, I'd be wary of that for the reasons I kind of outlined.
Yeah. It creates liability, doesn't it?
Well, and also ultimately, deliverability and viability is such a major issue, and almost everywhere at the moment, almost every return, you've kind of got potential duplication. Now, I see Corey's point, and indeed, many clients, particularly on strategic projects, large projects, are appointing building regulations advisors who are kind of sitting beside the PDBR to feed in. If the PDBR, for example, is an architect, I think they're entitled to discharge their duties as PDBR within the competencies of an architect, not the competencies of an MEP consultant. But there will be circumstances where you might need to reach out for specific advice. But it's a really interesting point, Corey, and I think if there were specific complexities, we might consider it, but not in day-to-day. Ideally, not need to in day-to-day projects. Interesting, really interesting.
And I guess we're gonna continue to operate in a bit of an ambiguous world, aren't we? There will be different solutions to this that emerge, and I guess clients will have to think that through quite strategically in terms of what their expectation is in terms of, you know, who's performing what roles. But no, really interesting conversation. It'll be interesting if over time a standard response to this emerges, or whether it, as I say, we'll end up with a number of different approaches. Okay. Last question we had on our list is a nice little thorny one, about the production of as-built information. So, some of us have got quite cynical about this over the years, but we won't dwell on that. But obviously, I mean, certainly we have come up across situations where design and build contractors have not been able to provide us with drawings that describe themselves as built, because their designers aren't prepared to sign them off, because their designers have played no part in the kind of quality monitoring process on site. And I suspect where contractors have provided them, I suspect a particular arrangement has been put in place to make that viable. So, but we were interested in, you know, with the emergence of principal designer, principal contractor roles in order to demonstrate regulatory compliance. Clearly, there is a need to make sure that as-built information that is provided is accurate. That then creates a requirement on those people that are signing off those drawings to spend more time on site and actually, you know, evidencing the due diligence that they've been through to be able to do that. And again, just wondered for anyone that has either experienced that or is experiencing that, whether there's evidence of changing procedure, changing process, that is enabling better quality as-built information to be produced. And again, just wondered what people's views of that are. Victoria.
Yeah, we've experienced it in doing some cladding remediation works.
Yeah.
You know, since the build, the architects have gone. They no longer want to stand by some of the drawings. Obviously, years later, we've come back and done that remediation work, and they don't want to update the drawings. So yeah, we've had that sort of issue. We're looking at sort of getting a standard on a design and build contract. We're getting a standard brief, if you like, that we're going to put into the contracts now to make sure that the regulations are being catered for, to make sure that everything that we need for the golden thread and for the safety cases thereafter is actually going into the tender, and they're going to sign up to that, and that's specifically costed for as well.
Yeah.
Now, I think as we know, that sends the prices sky high as well, doesn't it? Because they're going to up their insurances as well to cover that. But otherwise, we're not going to get that. And I think also what we've put in there is making sure that we're using things like field view is what we've used for one of our, but there are other systems out there. One we're particularly using, and making sure that we can definitely evidence that. So if there are issues of getting the as-built or as installed down the line, at least we've got something to evidence what's been done along the way. So it's just risk assessing, isn't it, really, trying to mitigate those risks as far as possible. But I think the tender is the place to do it. It's where we're going to capture it now if we can.
Lovely, no, thank you. Mandy.
So yeah, I'm not sure if this is part of the duty holder regime or how exactly it was introduced, but I mean, obviously, whereas typically the kind of designer and principal designer role stopped at the design phase, as part of the duty holder regime now, they're obviously kind of obliged under the legislation to work through to the end of. So that will kind of slightly shift the culture, I think, in that sense. In that regards.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think and not just culture. It'll change process, procedure, etc., etc., etc. No, good point, Mandy. George.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things here. Firstly, the clarification of what, for example, as-built means is very vague, and I think that clients it gets put into a contract, and I would think that most contracts require the construction team to deliver as-built information.
Right, as does building regs.
Yeah, right. Yes, and also in many cases they'll say we want an as-built model. Now, I would argue that almost no contracts I'm aware of, or projects I'm aware of, have any funding or any resourcing for that to really happen. And in fact, actually, the majority of the critical information that we need for things like Regulation 38 and to satisfy the building safety regulator, the elements that are required for that in terms of what's actually been installed are probably never going to go into a BIM model.
Yeah.
Because typically, particularly on residential, we find that the BIM models that are being created are actually the design models.
Yeah. Okay. Not as built.
No, and in fact, the trade contractors that that come along, particularly M&E, for this is different for data centers and different for complex buildings, because for their own purposes, they'll produce coordinated models, which still may not be as built, but they at least go into it. But in most cases, in our experience, the models that are provided as the M&E model are actually the M&E designer's model.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Now, the reason I'm saying this is that I think that typically what we've seen, just by asking people, that they'll say, well, you know, we just the clients deal with it by retention, and effectively they financially penalise the contractor for doing it, and the contractor often, the main contractor often gives up.
Yeah,
you know, because,
just takes on that liability, takes on that risk. Yeah.
Now, under the new regulations, I don't think that's any longer an option.
No, agreed. Yeah, agreed.
And I think we need far more transparency and probably education of clients and even the agents that are managing this process to actually hold the to figure out a different way of doing it.
Yeah. No, I agree. And you know, from a regulatory point of view, you know, just being able to evidence that you've got a suite of as-built drawings isn't likely to be enough. You know, you probably need to be able to evidence how you know as the client that is actually what's been built. Just a spin-off question, and it just kind of came to me. One of the things that we've been exploring, as I'm sure many of the clients have, is to what extent photographic evidence can play a part in kind of evidencing the as-built condition. We've certainly got contractors who are already starting to use photographic, you know, records, with in my experience mixed results. You know, lots and lots of photographs, but not necessarily organized in a way that's particularly helpful. We're also talking to organizations like, I'm sure you may have heard of Multivista, who take photographic records in a kind of very structured and deliberate way. They can then pin those records to the BIM models if you need be, albeit, as George says, the model is probably a design model rather than an as-built model in itself. But interesting, if you've got a BIM model that's designed, but you've appended as-built photographic evidence to it, you know, to what extent that then becomes more of an accurate as-built record. Just didn't know whether we've got clients out there that are also thinking about, you know, photographic evidence, how you're using it, how far you're going with it. From our point of view, we're dipping our toe in the water. We've not committed to it wholeheartedly. I suspect we will at some point in the near future. But yeah, just wondered if anyone's got any views on the role of photographic evidence and how that might play out. Oh, Simon, thank the Lord. Hi, good morning.
Hello, I'm from Ealing, London Borough of Ealing.
Okay.
In my many roles, I'm an interim. In my many roles, previous roles at Clarion, Hyde, and other organisations, we've always used Multivista and a couple of other companies.
Okay.
In this aspect of taking photographic images and doing it line by line on a diagram, and having all of that information to back up all of the remediation works that we've encountered and done to date. Even at Ealing, we've brought Multivista on board. There are plenty of other companies that do exactly the same thing, who are really good. But for evidence backed information that you can provide to certain individuals at different stages of the progress of the build, it's a brilliant tool. They can also do it on their Revit models, so the 3D modeling, and you can go into each location and see throughout the build stages of exactly what's been installed at certain locations, at certain individuals and processes throughout that actual build. So it's brilliant.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. I mean, I'm on the same page as you. We do use Multivista for our remedial work programs, particularly our cladding replacement work. It's more on the new build side. We haven't quite fully committed to it yet, but yeah, I'm with you. You know, a picture, you know, tells 1,000 words, doesn't it? So
well, it is the as built, isn't it? That's the point. It is the as built. It's not an approximate. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
So
absolutely.
Just to add to that. Paul's got his hand up before me, so maybe I'll let Paul go first.
Paul.
Thank you. No, photograph is not just for the as-built, it's for ongoing works and deficiencies within buildings, etc. It's evidence of before, during any repairs, and after repairs for your post-inspections. You know, all that information, that photographic is vital.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Thank you.
Even on a stock condition survey, you can go back to it and look at how it's actually built and how it's then how it's dilapidated since then. So it's brilliant.
But it has to be done in a very structured and organized way. You know,
definitely.
I've got contractors who are roaming around site with video cameras on their helmets, and then, you know, I said to them, I said, how are you going to give me that information at the end of the job? And they said, oh, we're going to print it all out and give you a paper base for. Oh, fantastic. Yeah, that's kind of not what we're looking for here. So yeah, work in progress, but you're right. It's a very valuable tool. Before I go to George, Mandeep, you're gonna say something.
Yeah, I mean, just about probably about 10 years ago now, we did like a bit of a pilot project at Care. When I was at DPAM. So as well as the pictures, I mean, we started attaching the kind of construction completion forms and that kind of general kind of IT kind of inspection testing plans to the objects. And then what you could do then is when you go into your viewer, if you've attached it all correctly, you can actually then effectively monitor the kind of completion. So I could say, like, show me all the assets which have had kind of concrete curing kind of concrete curing done and the final kind of finishing done, and then it would highlight them in different color, and then it showed me outstanding ones as well. And obviously, I think you can take that to, I think when you talk about plan, manage, monitor, that's what kind of comes in my head, where not just pictures, but all those forms can then be attached to assets, and they help you monitor the ongoing progress of the project. And obviously, if you could tie that in with a program somehow, it would make that even more powerful, because then you can see if you're on track. And for me, that's the kind of, with BIM, that's the kind of true kind of definition of plan, manage, and monitor.
Yeah, no, spot on. And George, I'll come to you in a sec. I just got a thought in my head. So for us, one of the things, and this plays to the kind of principal designer conversation as well. We already employ an army of quality management people. You know, we have fire guardians, we have structural guardians, clerk of works, etc., etc., etc. One of the conversations we're having is if we were to employ an organisation like Multivista to generate this quality photographic evidence, what impact does that then have on the role of the inspectors? You know, so the people that can't get to site every day, one, because they don't have the capacity, and two, we probably can't afford it. But if we can provide them with good quality photographic evidence, and the principal designer would be in here as well, to what extent does that then make them more efficient in terms of being able to deliver their service? Yeah, don't know the answer to that yet, and I can see on Scott's face that he's not sure either. But it's something that we're investigating and exploring. Anywho, George.
Yeah, anybody that knows me, I don't tend to use BIM4Housing to promote what we're doing in Active Plan consciously, but I think on this particular point, it's something that I do need to raise, and that is that we've been using 360 photography and tagging assets and using that back to spaces for a couple of years now, in particular from the FM perspective. And one of the reasons we're doing that is because when they send somebody to site to do an inspection, they don't normally, you might send somebody that understands fabric, but they don't understand M&E, or they don't understand electrical. So therefore, you end up with a partially expert view of the condition of an asset or what that asset is. So what we've been doing with Sodexo, and now recently Atkins have started using it as well, is that they take the 360 photo, and then they've got a team of experts who that's input into Active Plan, and then they've got a team of experts who then go and tag the 360 photo with a standardized library, so that we end up with proper COBie data actually written to the space. Now we're partnering we've been working with Multivista for some time on this, and also just last week we've managed to do it with Open Space. So the reason I'm saying that is it's a combination of different technologies, but as David said, the critical thing is making sure that you can actually reference it back to a space. And when people are walking around doing the live photography, the photogrammetry, it's not actually referencing back to spaces. Yeah, so you can only look at it, and therefore you need to relate it to the space, and that's what we've done. So if anybody's interested in that, I'd be obviously very happy to show you what we've been doing. We're doing it at the moment for Tower Hamlets. We've got 78 blocks that are being done, and Ridge, the surveyors, are going around and doing it, and they're then taking the 360 photography and the spatial models. They're coming into Active Plan, which they're then going to be tagged. Anyway.
Thank you, George. I mean, just so everyone knows, it was George that put this item on the agenda, and I think it was just so he could sell you what it is he's doing. I'm joking. So that's us. That's us to at the end of the question. Has anyone got anything else they'd like to kind of put on the table to discuss in the context of principal designer role? Because we do have a couple of AOB items that George wants to talk about. Anyone got any closing thoughts? Right. Okay. Listen, thank you very much for engaging. Hopefully people have found that of interest and useful. In many regards, it still feels like a work in progress, but the ability to be able to share our thoughts and experiences is, I think, a helpful thing to do. George, I'm going to pass over to, oh, hang on, Paul. Should we pass to George?
Yes,
Paul?
sorry, it was it was in response to a question that was asked very early on in regards to the tranche 1 buildings, and the response is that the BSR is prioritising buildings that meet at least one of the criteria. over 30 meters to 49 meters high, with more than 217 residential units.
Yeah.
Over 50 meters high, with more than 11 residential units. Clad with combustible aluminium composite material, and large panel systems built between 1957 and 1973 with a gas supply, where it is unclear if reinforcement work has been carried out.
Right. Okay. And that's how the tranches are being set up. Yeah. From a risk point of view. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's tranche one.
Thank you, Paul. No, that's helpful insight. Thank you. Okay. Got 15 minutes left, George. So
Okay.
your AO, I'm just going to pass to you.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm always trying to get other software companies and people into BIM4Housing. And this is a company, View City, that I've been talking to for a couple of years now. And a lot of councils and developers actually use it. It's owned by Savills, well, it's part owned by Savills and also Ramboll. And what they've got is models, computer models of all these of the city centres of all these cities. And I'll put this report into the chat for you to look at. But I think it's really quite exciting because they're doing things from a planning and a development point of view, and it's quite probable that some of your colleagues in the development department have already got software licenses for this, and they may be willing to share them with you. So what it's being used to do is both planning and also they've got things from a point of view of being able to. They've got this new tool called SiteSolve. I bumped into them at the Leeds property conference last week, and it just seemed so timely to make people aware of them. So I've got some questions for everybody to see if you could find out whether any of your colleagues are using View City or something like it. Are they willing to share access? What use cases could we come up with to show value? What I'm thinking is, for example, this is like a gaming engine. So you not quite a gaming engine, but you can actually use it to see where fire brigades could locate their engines and things. And then how could we integrate it with our other systems? So if you're interested, maybe put your name in the chat and we can send you some information. I'll share the thing anyway. Is everybody aware of this tool?
No,
I've not seen it, George.
Okay, so I'm quite excited about it. I think it looks really cool.
George,
Yes.
This could be quite a nice subject. I'm not sure how we set it out. Do you remember how we've done in the past the one-to-one meetings?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Pulled together a lot of stuff in quite some detail through short one-to-one meetings with a lot of players. Would that be worth thinking about?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one because one of the things I think we've all got in organizations, we've got silos of different people in planning, compliance, asset management, fire safety, and drawing together people, I think, around something like this could be useful. I don't know. I mean, we don't have any interest in this.
I mean, I did a lot of those, didn't I? And I mean, in some of the meetings, we'd have 6 or 7 people from one company or one organization, and they were sharing stuff that other people in the meeting didn't even know they knew.
But that's exactly what I'm thinking.
Okay, no, thanks. If you put something in the chat, yeah, that's really helpful. Has anyone got any questions for George at this stage, or happy just that we'll have the link and we'll review?
I've got two more things quickly.
I know you have.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so the other thing is that next week at Digital Construction Week, if anybody's going, we've got the roundtable sessions again, and one of the things that we've been focusing on, that a lot of people have been contributing to, are the 4 barriers to the golden thread, the things that break the golden thread. How do we address these things? And we've now got, these are the sessions that we had last year. So if you could make it to Excel and you're interested, then you'd be more than welcome. It would be great if we could know that you're coming, though. And then we're publishing these documents, which are going to, this is the result that we've distilled from the many workshops that we've held over this last year, and we're feeding these back into the department. So if you're interested and you can make it to Excel, let us know. We'll share these with you as soon as we've finished anyway. And I was just going to finish off by saying that on documents, health and safety files and O&Ms, for building safety case reports, being able to find the right information, I think Ed would endorse this, it's a nightmare sorting through O&Ms and health and safety files, because everybody's got everything organised differently. Now, over this last sort of 9 months, we've been working with the HSE. So the HSE are also trying to get to some standardised ways of holding health and safety files. So what we've been doing is sharing some ideas that we've been developing with them, and they've now come back to us, and they've been feeding back their ideas, and we're now coming back to a standardised way, potentially a standardised way of holding documents in health and safety files and O&Ms in a way that is useful from an operations point of view, rather than just, as it happened, what the work packages were organised. So, Paul Oakley, are you available?
Yeah, I'm here.
Could you just show us, just for 5 minutes, what we've been going through with the HSE?
Can you see my screen?
Yeah, got you.
Okay. Yeah, so as George mentioned, this the sort of scope of this has changed as we started on, because initially it was looking at a folder structure for use within Active Plan, because we have a document repository as part of the solution. And then as we started then looking at the contents of different things, what we realized is we were coming up with really a full schedule of content that should be included, because there's lots of different ways of holding the information, whether it's held within databases, in things like all the contacts would be delivered directly through COBE into a database, as opposed to being in a Word document or a PDF as part of the health and safety file. So we've generally got 8 main areas. We've also down to work packages, general information about the health and safety file, the basis of preparation, descriptions, etc. Residual hazards and future risks, health and safety statutory reports, demolitions, future works, which covers things like plant replacement, structural advice, etc. Strategy documents, so that could be down to things like cleaning requirements, maintenance requirements. Fire as a specific element, so how you deal with those. The consultants involved, so that would be your architectural structure, really depending on what you've got within the project. And then you get down to the specific work packages. So the trouble with the work packages, that is dependent upon generally how the main contractors have procured things. And that then goes down into sort of a further sort of level of breakdown on those. Now, on work packages, sometimes an O&M document provided by a particular work package contractor will just be one PDF and everything will be based in there. Other ones, it will be a whole array of documents which make that up. So the next tab sort of goes down in more detail as we start to get down into the sort of the full schedule of contents that go into those sorts of things. So particular work packages, you'll have an introduction, company details, scope of works, down to the description for the particular work packages. You need to know things like your COSHs, and then systems. Again, it depends on how particular work packages are procured. You could have one work package for the whole M&E supply, or it could be broken down to a particular work package just for the low voltage electrical. So again, there could be single systems, there could be multiple systems, but actually understanding the different systems, the supplier, the integrations within those and circuits within those is also a sort of key part of the requirements on those. So again, we have a breakdown per system, and those systems can be expanded as and when you need it. Product requirements and how we deal with those, so that they're breakdown into things. George, do you want me to go through comments from Gordon or not? Or?
Yes, if you could do the
George,
very
I'm
brief.
conscious of time.
Yeah.
We're kind of drawing towards an end. I don't know how much detail we need to get into on this at this stage.
Okay, also, so the HSE have basically recognised that basically the 8 sort of main categories we have fall similar to the HSE requirements. But what they've come back with is it would be really great to sort of start testing this on some real projects and seeing where it fits into that. So I think that's some of the discussions that George was sort of trying to push.
Yeah, okay.
It's very much a collaborative thing. Yeah.
Is it possible to circulate some stuff, George, that people on the call can respond to?
Definitely.
And see if we can generate some interest that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you happy with that?
Yeah, we're trying to make this open and free to everybody.
Yeah,
so,
sure.
Yeah.
No, I mean that's really interesting context. Scott, I'm conscious that you put your hand up. Is that moment come and gone?
It was just a request, please, for the specific timings next week, George, for the round tables.
4 o'clock.
4 o'clock.
Thank you. It's for 45 minutes. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, George.
Hang on a second.
Sorry, on both days or one day?
Just one day. It's on the Monday. Sorry, it's on the Wednesday.
On the Wednesday.
5th. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Okay.
Thank you.
So
Simon put his hand up briefly.
He did, and then I think he's taken it back down again.
Okay.
So Simon, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay. Sorry, I was just gonna send an applause to George and Paul, but yeah.
Fabulous.
Well, thank you.
All right. Well, you've said it out loud now, so no need. It's fine. Okay. Anyone got any other business before we depart each other's company? Okay. So just leaves to me to kind of say thank you. Thank you for attending. Thank you for your contributions. Some of you may have noticed at the beginning that there was a note that came up, and I probably should have said something, that this has been recorded. And there will be some notes that are put together and circulated. So all of the kind of useful things we've been talking about will be captured forever, you lucky people. Mandeep, have you got something closing you want to say?
Yeah, so I just shared that tranche 1 definition with you separately in a separate chat. So at some point, maybe you just circulate that as well if you like, when you do a circulation email or something like that.
Thanks, Mandeep. That's helpful. Now again, thank you to everyone. And it's been a very well attended session today, actually, which is great. It's been great to have multiple people contributing. So watch this space. There will be future conversations, and hopefully you found it interesting and helpful. But I'll draw it to a close at that point, George, unless you've got any closing comments you'd like to make.
I'll just say how well you've managed it, to be honest. I think you've done a good job. Thank you.
You are very kind. I mean, I've got to be good at something, right?
Well, there is that.
All right, guys. Look, nice to see you all, and have good days.
Thank
you so much.
Cheers.
Take care all.
Bye.
Bye bye.